On this episode of What I Tell Investors, we're going to talk about the cybersecurity market in the SMB. We're going to talk about what the need is, talk about the old architecture that's being displaced, what the new architecture will look to be, the kinds of products and services that are in this space, and why there's a rush on it. Go ahead and click that like and subscribe button, and let's dive right in. So cybersecurity in the SMB. So let's take a quick moment to talk about the SMB market in general. For most small to mid-sized companies, they've got technology investments, and as things have gotten more and more complicated, we've now had to layer on security on top of that. When I first started delivering IT services to small companies in the early 2000s, the biggest headache we were worried about was losing data. Occasionally the virus that might come in that might cause a small corruption or a particular workstation code to go down. But in general, the concern for the typical small company wasn't there. But what's happened over the last 20 years is as the technology has gotten easier and as everything has gotten more and more connected, the cyber criminals on the other side have moved from having to be very targeted against big companies to being much more systematic about what they approach. In fact, the cyber criminals on the other side of the problem are now able to automate and deliver in a very systematic way. In fact, they're companies that are building software for then their sales folk to go forth and deploy via an affiliate model. So the cyber criminals have gotten very aggressive, and they can go after, in that systematic way, smaller paydays at scale. In fact, it's become a volume game. So for them, all they have to do is get out to as many places as possible. You systematically start winning a customer at a one stop at a time. You can get, anywhere between a few $100s to a few $1,000s to even larger for all of these systematic breaches. So that's where the complexity for the small company has come in. So let's talk about the old way that we used to think about security. Again, if we're thinking back in time, what happened before was that we would worry about the perimeter. We'd make sure people couldn't get into our environments, but we wouldn't have to worry about that internal environment, that sort of hard outer shell and soft nougaty goodness in the middle was the way that we did network architectures. And it would generally work, particularly when things were kind of simple, and as long as things didn't traverse the barrier, we knew we could control the people and the presence within that. So we had a very systematic kind of way. We'd put good firewalls on the external, we'd watch traffic that was flowing, and then we would make sure that the workstations themselves were sort of covered, and we would protect the data, and we'd be in pretty good shape. But what's happened is the two major trends over time, both of which have been accelerated by the pandemic. The first, of course, is this idea that everything became more cloud-oriented. Now our data lives in lots of different places. It may live in lots of different systems, so we're not able to create a secure perimeter around our office to make sure that it's secure. And additionally, now we've also distributed people. Before we had workforces that were distributed with some work from home. Of course, now we have a lot of it. So it's made this old way of thinking about security very non-tenable. I'm simplifying a little bit, but you get the idea. So I'm going to talk about the new way, the architecture we're moving towards. The ultimate idea here is what we consider a zero trust architecture. The core idea being that instead of trusting things, we will instead trust nothing and allow only the access that is required at that particular moment and keep re-verifying. So we can make sure over and over again that every single time something is requested, that it is coming from someone that we know who they are, and that we've done some level of verification to that endpoint to know that it is in a state that we're comfortable giving them the data. In a way, you want to move all the way toward an environment where we don't really have to worry about whether or not the endpoint is riddled with viruses or problems, as long as we can control the data that's on top of it and make sure that it can't breach. This architecture is called zero trust. It involves a number of different things. It's not just a product thing, because as I've implied in there, there's the ongoing piece of it. It is a constant level of maintenance and enforcement to make sure not only the software works, but the policies, and to make sure that we are continuing to work the way we should. Additionally, there's another level of complexity to this, because we've got to watch all of the cloud services as well and make sure they continue to be compliant in the way that we want them to be. Are they configured in a way that they don't allow leaks? Are they in a way that we can track it? Is the data going only the places that we want, and we haven't left anything legacy? So that's the architecture that we're moving towards. So let's talk a little bit about the products and services. And the reason this is an interesting market is because fundamentally the technologies that the internet are built on are not very secure. They weren't built with security in mind. If you go back to the original connectivity of the internet, it was a trusted research environment. So we are not checking for identity, we're not checking for security at a very core level. And so these pieces must be added on. And additionally, we have to make sure that they're done in a way that is that the users will embrace it, that we can continue to manage it over time, and particularly in the small company where we're dealing with smaller budgets and larger scale. We need to make this in a systematic approach so that we can make sure that we can roll out enough security to all of the smaller customers, but not so much maintenance that it becomes a liability that they can't do ongoing. So we have a real rush on people trying to figure out how to secure the SMB. And if you think about that architecture that I talked about, it's heavily services oriented. Oftentimes in the past, we've liked to sell a couple of products, and that's our security solution. But instead now we have to make sure that we're doing services really, really well. We have to make sure that ongoing, all of those policies and procedures are built into the way that we're deploying it in those small customers. That's why there's quite a rush here, because we've made the problem is much more complicated than it was, and thus we have a lot of companies that are moving into this space to try and figure it out. So what's the upside opportunity for investors here? The idea really is those companies that can get smart about this and figure out the ways that work and get this solution out to customers in a way that works for them are going to be the ones that do really well. And because to a certain degree we don't have an entire sense of all of the ways to do this, as well as an ever-changing threat landscape, there's going to be lots of ongoing opportunity going forward, and thus a big rush here for investors to be looking at this space. It's why all of the interest in cybersecurity, because we've now reached the point where there's enough interest in it, the threats are real enough and relevant at a large scale, and thus there's players trying to figure out exactly how to do that. One of the mechanisms that they've been looking at getting to them is through the IT providers that deliver those services. You'll hear them all called IT services companies, solution providers, or more broadly, MSPs, or managed services providers. That's a parlance for what was in that piece. I won't get into that academic argument about what managed services is. And if you're interested more in the managed services space, I've got some other videos that overview that entire piece and what the opportunity is. So that helps you understand that context. But the cybersecurity play is the way that you can get products and services delivered out to small customers through this group of players that service them. These players have a set toolkit that they've been working with so far, things like the professional services automation tool and the remote monitoring and management tool that they've been using commonly historically. And so this is one of the ways that has been going to market, is to latch onto those. And those key four players are also thinking about how they can get into the cybersecurity game. You'll see them acquiring more and more cybersecurity solutions and extending their opportunity out. So for many of these smaller security players, they're trying to build up their customers, and they get acquired by either one of these kind of platform plays or potentially one of the other larger security firms who are trying to extend their reach as well. Of course, you can also see a potential outcome here for the cloud platform players who will also be looking to extend their reach into the SMB through the security channel. So these are a couple of the different ways that I'm seeing these companies may grow and exit the space. This video is designed to just give you a quick overview of the space, the kinds of questions that I get asked commonly about what cybersecurity is in the SMB space and why it's relevant. If you're interested in more content like this, go ahead and explore around, particularly in the What I Tell Investors series, which gives some overview into the SMB market and the way IT services are delivered there. Always available for questions if you've got anything you're interested in, and thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you like it, go ahead and hit like. Hit that subscribe button. I do a ton of material covering the IT services market, and I deliver a daily podcast called The Business of Tech, which is all the news about technology through the lens of those IT service providers. So if you're interested in learning more, you can listen to the issues that matter to them and go from there. There's videos here on the YouTube channel giving you insights into the kind of issues that they are providing and what they're thinking about in terms of the way they deliver their services. If you need more information, go ahead and visit mspradio.com. You can reach out and get in touch with me, and I'm always happy to answer more questions. Thanks for listening.